नमस्कार दोस्तों, माई सेल्फ अथर्वा मेडकरी ऑल्सो नाउन एज वेंकटेश। आप सभी लोगों का कृष्णाई प्री मेडिकल एंड मेडिकल एकेडमी इस एजुकेशनल यूट्यूब चैनल में स्वागत है। To perform any activity, we need energy. This energy is obtained from breakdown of organic molecules such as sugar, fat, and proteins inside the body cells. During the process breaking down of organic molecules, the cells continuously use oxygen and release carbon dioxide. To provide fresh oxygen to the cells and remove carbon dioxide which is harmful to them. Living organisms inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. This process of inhaling and exhaling is called breathing. A process of breathing accompanied by the breakdown of foods to produce energy is called respiration. The mechanism of breathing there is depending on the habitat and level of organization of an animal. Lower invertebrate such as sponges, coelenterate, and flatworms exchange gases by the simple diffusion to their body surface. In insects such as cockroaches and earthworms, tubular extension of the body wall called trachea and moist skin help transport that atmospheric air throughout the body. Most mollusks use special vascularized structure called ctenidium for gaseous exchange. Some arthropods such as spider and scorpion use many thin folds of membrane resemble in pages of the book for respiration. These are called book lungs. Terrestrial forms of vertebrate use vascularized bags called lungs. Among vertebrate, fishes respire through gills, whereas amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals respire through lungs. Apart from lungs, frogs can also respire through their skin. Mammals have well-developed respiratory system. In human, it consists of respiratory organs such as respiratory tract and lungs. The respiratory tract include the nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, and bronchi. The nose is made up of cartilage and bone. While inhaling, it warms, moistens, and filters air that enters the body through nostril. This air passes through the nasal chamber. The nasal chamber opens into the pharynx, which is common passage for food and air. The pharynx opens through glottis of the larynx region to the trachea. The larynx is cartilaginous box, also called the sound box, because it helps in sound production. The glottis is covered by a thin elastic cartilaginous flap called the epiglottis. That prevent the entry of food into the larynx. A trachea is tubular passage that allows air into the lungs. It is made up of C-shaped cartilaginous rings and it is divided into two branches called primary bronchi. Each primary bronchus undergo repeated divisions to form the secondary and tertiary bronchi. and bronchioles ending up in a very thin terminal bronchioles. The terminal bronchiole connect to duct called alveolar duct that open into tiny, spongy, air-filled sacs called alveoli, which look almost like bunch of grapes, and average adult lungs contain about 600 million alveoli. Each alveolus is covered by thin and fragile blood capillaries which combine to form a pulmonary vein. The pulmonary vein carries blood to the heart, and from the heart to the pulmonary artery carries inflow of blood to the lungs. Bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli form a part of pair of lungs, the left lung and right lung. The left lung has two lobes and slightly smaller because of location of heart near it. The right lung is bigger with three lobes. The lobes are spongy and elastic organs with broad bottoms. Each lung is enclosed by two membranes, the outer pleural membrane and inner pleural membrane. The outer pleural membrane is closed contact with thoracic lining, whereas the inner pleural membrane is in contact with lung surface. The membrane encloses the space called the pleural cavity that contains pleural fluid. The pleural fluid reduces the friction of lung surface when the lung expand and contract. The lung is situated in the airtight thoracic chamber. A thick membranous structure below the lungs separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. It is called the diaphragm. The thoracic chamber is supported by the vertebral column dorsally, by the sternum ventrally, by the ribs laterally, and by the dome-shaped diaphragm on lower side. The lungs in the thorax are arranged so that any change in the volume of thoracic cavity reflects on the lung cavity or pulmonary cavity. Based on function, the respiratory system is divided into two parts, the conducting part and respiratory part. The conducting part spread from the external nostrils to the terminal bronchiole. It transports atmospheric air to the alveoli, clears it from foreign particles, humidifies the air. The respiratory part contains the alveoli and alveolar duct. The actual diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between blood and atmospheric air takes place in the alveoli of respiratory part. Observe your breath. Your chest expands every time you breathe in and contract every time you breathe out. This is because breathing causes the movement in lung and chest muscle to maintain the body at equilibrium pressure. Let's study respiration in detail. Respiration involves breathing, external respiration, internal transport, internal respiration, cellular respiration. Breathing is two-step process. The first step, called inspiration, it involves in taking in air from the atmosphere inside the body, and second step is expiration, involve releasing air from the body into the atmosphere. During inspiration, diaphragm is pulled down. This causes the intercostal muscle to lift off ribs in the sternum, thus expanding the rib cage. This increases the volume of the thoracic cavity, causing the pressure inside to the decreases. This action allows the air to enter the body cavity, making lung expand. The expiration process is just opposite to the inspiration process. In expiration, the diaphragm and intercostal muscles relax. This returns the thoracic cavity to its original volume and increases the air pressure in lungs, as air pressure inside the lungs is higher than the atmospheric pressure. The air rushes outside the lung. The second stage of respiration is called external respiration, and it involves diffusion of gases across the alveolar membrane. The diffusion membrane is made up of three major layers, namely thin squamous epithelium of alveoli, the endothelium of alveolar capillaries, and basement substances in between them. The alveoli are primary sites of exchange of gases. The thickness of the membrane is less than the millimeter. Carbon dioxide is 20 to 25 times more soluble than oxygen, hence the amount of carbon dioxide that can diffuse through the diffusion membrane is much higher compared to that of oxygen. The diffused gases are carried by the blood from the lungs to different organs of the body. This is called gas transport. Blood from heart enters the lungs through the pulmonary artery, arterioles and alveolar capillaries. In lungs, oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged between blood and air. This blood then flows out of the alveolar capillaries through venules and back to the heart by the pulmonary vein. Heart pumps this oxygen-rich blood to different tissues. Hemoglobin in the blood transport the oxygen with diffusion of gases between the blood and tissues. This is called internal respiration. The oxygen that carries to the tissues is used by cells to produce ATP. ATP is produced by breaking down of organic molecules. This process is called cellular respiration. Thus, respiration takes place in humans. The volume of gas contained within the lungs, called respiratory volume, and different combination of lungs volume are called respiratory capacities. The volume of air inspired and expired by the lungs can be estimated by using procedure is called spirometry. Let's discuss the respiratory volume and respiratory capacities. Volume of air inspired or expired during each normal breath is called tidal volume or TV. A healthy man can inspire or expire approximately 6,000 to 8,000 ml of air per minute. Inspiratory reservoir volume IRV is the additional volume of air that person can inspire by maximum inspiration. This usually happens during exercise or excretion. We need to breathe forcibly. This averages from 2500 ml to 3000 ml. The additional volume of air that person can expire by maximum expiration is called expiratory reservoir volume ERV. This averages from 1000 ml to 1100 ml. The volume of air that remains in the lungs now after the maximum expiration is called residual volume. This averages from 1100 ml to 1200 ml. The total volume of air a person can inspire after a normal expiration. This is inspiratory capacity. These include both tidal volume and inspiratory reservoir volume. Total volume of air a person can expire after a normal inspiration is called expiratory capacity. These include both tidal volume and expiratory reservoir volume ERV. Volume of air that remain in lung after a normal expiration is called functional residual capacity. These include both expiratory reservoir volume and residual volume. Volume of maximum inspiration after a forced expiration Volume of maximum expiration after a forced inspiration is known as vital capacity. These include expiratory reservoir volume, tidal volume, and inspiratory reservoir volume. It is approximately 3 liters. The total volume of air accommodated in the lungs after maximum inspiration is known as total lung capacity. This includes residual volume, expiratory reservoir volume, tidal volume, and inspiratory reservoir volume. It is this capacity of lungs that allows swimmers, long distance runner, cyclists, and other athletes to maintain the stamina, race speed required to win a race. We know that the exchange of gases occurs primarily between alveoli, blood, and tissues. It takes place on basis of pressure and concentration gradient using simple diffusion. The concentration gradient for oxygen and carbon dioxide from alveoli to blood and blood to tissues differs with difference of partial pressure at the site of diffusion. Partial pressure is a pressure contributed by individual gas in a mixture of gases. It is represented as PO2 for oxygen and PCO2 for carbon dioxide. This diagram denotes for the partial pressure for oxygen and carbon dioxide in different parts of the body with the concentration gradient for oxygen and carbon dioxide from alveoli to blood, blood to tissue, and vice versa. As CO2 is 20 to 25 times more soluble than oxygen, the amount of carbon dioxide that can diffuse through the diffusion membrane is much more than that of oxygen. Oxygen and carbon dioxide are transported to various organs of the body by blood. About 97% oxygen is transported by red blood cells, whereas remaining 3% is carried in dissolved state through the plasma. Nearly 20 to 25% carbon dioxide is transported by red blood cells, while 70% of it is carried by bicarbonate and remaining 5 to 10% is carried in dissolved state through plasma. Let's look at the transportation of oxygen from alveoli to tissues. Hemoglobin in the blood binds with oxygen to form oxyhemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a red colored iron containing protein. Each hemoglobin molecule can carry 4 molecules of oxygen. The binding of oxygen with hemoglobin is influenced by factors such as partial pressure of oxygen, carbon dioxide, hydrogen ion concentration, and temperature. The percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen, it plotted against the partial pressure of oxygen, result in sigmoid curve called the oxygen dissociation curve. This curve is used to study the effective factors such as partial pressure of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion concentration on the binding of oxygen with hemoglobin. Alveoli are more useful to the formation of oxyhemoglobin as they have high oxygen partial pressure, low carbon dioxide partial pressure, a small hydrogen ion concentration, and lower temperature. On the other hand, tissues are useful to dissociation of oxygen from oxyhemoglobin as they have low oxygen partial pressure, high carbon dioxide partial pressure, high hydrogen ion concentration, and high temperature. Therefore, oxygen combines with hemoglobin on surface of the lungs and gets dissociated in the tissue. Now let's understand how carbon dioxide is transported from tissues to alveoli. Carbon dioxide is carried by the hemoglobin in a blood as a carb-aminohemoglobin. The binding of carbon dioxide and hemoglobin is high in tissues. The carbon dioxide partial pressure is high and oxygen partial pressure is low. On other hand, when carbon dioxide partial pressure is low and oxygen partial pressure is high, as in alveoli, dissociation of carbon dioxide from carbamino hemoglobin takes place. The carbonic anhydrase enzyme present in red blood cells and plasma facilitate diffusion in tissues and alveoli. In tissues, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is high. It diffuses in red blood cells and plasma to form bicarbonate ion and hydrogen ions. In alveoli, where partial pressure of carbon dioxide is low, carbon dioxide and water are formed. Thus, carbon dioxide trapped by bicarbonate in red blood cells is transported to alveoli and release its carbon dioxide. For every 100 ml of deoxygenated blood, hemoglobin releases approximately 4 ml of carbon dioxide to the alveoli. The respiratory rhythm is maintained by the human brain. This is regulated by 3 respiratory centers in the pons medulla region of the brain called respiratory rhythm center. It includes the inspiratory center, expiratory center and pneumotaxic center. Neural signals from the center can reduce the duration of inspiration and thereby alter the respiratory rate. A chemosensitive area is situated adjacent to the rhythm center, which is highly sensitive to carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions. Hence, increase in these substances can activate this center, which in turn can signal the rhythm center to make necessary adjustment in respiratory process by which these substances can be eliminated. Asthma and emphysema are the disorder of respiratory system caused by environmental factors. Asthma is characterized by difficulty in breathing due to inflammation in bronchi and bronchioles. Emphysema is a chronic disorder caused by rupture of the alveolar walls, which decrease the respiratory surface. In industries involving grinding and stone breaking, long-term exposure to dust give rise to inflammation resulting in fibrosis and lung damage.